Unsolved.
JonBenet Ramsey case, Southwest Plaza Mall. So, continuing to look at the days prior to Christmas and what JonBenet was doing, we've already looked at the Christmas party at the Ramsey's house on the 23rd. And so this episode is going to focus on the Southwest Plaza Mall event in Littleton, Colorado. So JonBenet participated in the Royal Miss State pageant in Denver in the spring of 1996, and she won her division, and therefore she was to participate during the 4th of July time period for the national divisional title of America's Royal Miss. This was a 3-day event, I believe in Denver, and JonBenet won that.
My name is JonBenet Ramsey, and I'm 5.5.
5.5, okay. Pick one, turn left.
This notion that JonBenet Ramsey didn't participate in many beauty contests is surprising. According to Patsy Ramsey, JonBenet had been in 9 different beauty contests and 2 national ones. I guess it's a matter of what the definition of is. Because to me it seems like 9 contests is quite a lot for a 6-year-old girl. Since JonBenet was one of the divisional winners, she was asked to participate or volunteer to participate in the Lights of December parade in Boulder. And during the parade, a strange man walked up to the car that JonBenet was in. And we will look into that in a future episode on the Lights of December parade. Then on December 22nd, she participated in a non-competitive fun event with other girls from the Royal Miss America pageant at the Southwest Plaza in Littleton, Colorado. Now, if there was a connection between the mall performance and her murder on December 26th, then you can kind of see that it was somebody from Boulder in the area, because JonBenet had won the state competition in America's Royal Miss, and then she won this national title as Royal Miss, and then she was in the parade as Royal Miss in Boulder, and she was at the mall. Now there's discussion on the internet about a mysterious man at the mall, and who was he? And then there's the pageant person who asked a gentleman about being JonBenet's father, who apparently wasn't JonBenet's father, but was assumed to be JonBenet's father because he was watching JonBenet. And finally, I wanted to bring up this mystery letter that came after JonBenet's death. Apparently, it was mailed from Shreveport, Louisiana, and postmarked January 27, 1997, and it was mailed to the Boulder Police. And it was a handwritten letter, and it purports to be the parent of a daughter who once competed in a pageant with JonBenet. And little is known about the letter other than that.
Please subscribe to the Nancy Drew channel if you haven't already done so. Thanks.
When creating these videos, certain ideas come into your head. And in this episode, something that I realized was JonBenet was flying a great deal in 1996. She had been to Tennessee, Georgia, Florida, Michigan, and New York. And so some of those flights were probably with John Ramsey in his plane at Jeffco Airport. And so the thought that I had was, what about like a security guard at the gate at the airport, or somebody that works at the hangars that saw JonBenet? Maybe an intruder, he could be an intruder that did this horrible crime. Remember the episode on the ransom note being taken at face value? It's addressed to John. It doesn't mention JonBenet's name, it just says your daughter. It has some information about John, but not a lot. Like, it assumes that he's from the South, when technically he's not. So this might be a possibility. Well, this ends this episode of Unsolved. And on the next JonBenet Ramsey case, we're going to probably move on to the Christmas parade that JonBenet was in, and a mysterious man there. Or if anything develops, I'm going to look into the employees at Jeffco Airport, the security, see if there's anything there. And then tomorrow night, we have another episode on the Zodiac Killer case. So I'll see you later.